Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to Underdog Views, and I watched Lake Placid 3 with the tagline, don't forget your lunch. That's a silly tagline. It's just silly. I don't hate it, but it's kind of silly, yo. Now this movie was not better than the second movie. It was also not worse than the second movie, so, let's just start with the movie, shall we? We're flying over the lake. What's new? We had it also in the first one and the second one. And we're flying a bit in a circle this time. And then we fly over an open piece of grassland. We stay at the forest. And now I work, in green. And on one hand, it's kind of weird that it's an open grassland to me, because you have seedlings from a tree, so it usually you would just that's how a forest usually it's created. Seedlings, and that grows new trees. So but let's just go with it. So it's in the open field, and we're now angled above the road. We see a car, pickup driving towards us. Then we see him driving by while we're half in the forest, a bit stinky. Then we see the back of it, the usual shots, and it's from a grocery store from Dimitri's. And there's a guy driving it, and then we hear some giggle in the back, so he does his mirror, he looks in it, and we see a couple making out in the back. And the girl whispers something in the ear of the guy, and he knocks on the glass of the back window. The guy, the driver, says, "No potty breaks," and he says, "No, stop the truck. We're good. We're fine. We can walk from here." So he drove a bit further, and then he stopped the truck, and they got off, and then they asked, "How far's the lake?" "Half a mile east." And then they walked off, and he drove off. And we're gonna leave it at that, but not even a thank you for driving, giving us a lift. Nothing. I'm raised proper. I would say thank you. Last week, when I went from my one post to another post, in the morning, I had to walk for a bit, maybe 10 minutes. Nothing. But when I was halfway, a pair of colleagues drove by, and they asked if I want to have a lift, for maybe 300 meters, something like that, 400 meters, so, oh, okay, well, they drove a bit further, and then they came back, and then they asked for, "Hey, get in." Okay. So, and then when I got out, I said, thank you. Thank you for driving me a bit. Because, I was raised proper to say just thank you. Also, in Dutch, we have, in English you have you, as in you or you. But we have different kinds, with je, jullie, and then we have also u, just the letter u, just u, and that's more for them, somebody, usually somebody elderly, dank u, als u, instead of dank je, als je. And I usually use that with somebody, you know, that I don't know and that's looking older than me. Yeah. Because I was raised proper. Even though, you know, I like to, you know, cuss a lot, you know. But still, I'd be still too, you know, proper to the elderly. Yeah. Anyway, back to the movie, shall we? So, thank you. So, anyway, at first, you know, we saw also some tiny crocs, you know, maybe 6 or 4, but, you know, and apparently, the kid of the, you know, the main family, you know, he was just like Sadie in the last movie, and you know, Dolores, played by Betty White, rest in peace, in the first movie, feeding the fucking crocs. And his father was a wildlife guy, and his mother was a real estate. Yeah, real estate in Maine, where they are right now. You know, that part of Maine. Really, a lot of houses to sell. But 2 years later, you know, he was still feeding the crocs. Never telling, you know, his mother and father about it, you know, when the first time he found them. And when he tried to tell them, they just brushed it off, you know. Van, when he stole meat, you know, because they didn't have enough meat. And then the mother was called. And he tried to say, yeah, it's not for me, it's for the, yeah, you go home. He tried to tell you. And then apparently the babysitter, Vika, who was smoking, you know, planted her cigarette and lighter in his backpack. And when, you know, when she was calling the father, so the mother was calling the father for, yeah, he stole meat, and yeah, he took up smoking. And it can't be Vika because Vika doesn't even smoke. That's legit what she said. Vika doesn't even smoke because Vika doesn't even smoke. That's the reason, because Vika doesn't even smoke. So it has to be our son. Really? That's how quick you go for your son? That, and for that reason, because Vika doesn't even smoke, so it has to be him? Okay, I would also think from, you know, if I found cigarettes, you know, in my teenage son, yeah, I don't know how old he specifically is, you know, 14, 30 or something like that, you know, I would think also, oh yeah, he smokes, yeah, it's in his backpack. But, you know, there's a babysitter. An older babysitter. Well, you know, she smelled the smoke once she was in, you know, the living room, you know. But she was also a bit tired, so, you know, she didn't really, it didn't really maybe clicked, you know, from, oh, this smells smoke, you know, because she was a bit woozy maybe. But, so yeah, it has to be Connor, which is also a bit of a stupid name. You know, Connor is more of a last name instead of a surname, in my opinion. You know. Anyway, a bit later in the movie, mother runs outside because the father and the sheriff are in the truck while in a car while a croc is, you know, biting the back of the car. She runs outside from the cabin with a chainsaw. And then when she's eye in eye with it, you know, eye to eye with it, she's frozen. She doesn't do anything. And then what she does, she turns around and runs back and falls. Then why did you came out in the first place, honey? Yes, you kinda saved your husband by, you know, distracting the crocodile, but you didn't do shit. And then your husband had to came out of the car to save your ass. That's really smart, isn't it? Yeah. Other crocodiles in this movie were CGI. There was no animatronics that I saw. Maybe there were some, but I didn't see them. Overall, this movie also gets a 3.75, just like the second movie. You know, it doesn't really deliver. Both doesn't really deliver as far as the first one, but they're still decent movies. You know, I don't dislike them, and I still enjoy them. So I can't wait for the fourth movie, which I don't know how it's called, Lake Placid. Final chapter of Lake Placid. What was it? Is it? I think it's the final chapter, or it's Legacy. Yeah, it's the final chapter. Lake Placid, the final chapter, and then we get Lake Placid Legacy. Hopefully. Let's see if it does it. Yes. Then we get Lake Placid Legacy on Friday. Oh shit. Later today you get the first episode of the third season of the Twilight Zone, and you get a Clockwork Orange, which I've actually seen already. But it was a recommendation, so I'm gonna watch it again for the second time. I've seen the movie out just before I started the channel, so you know, because I know it was very famous, so I want to watch it. Yeah. And I did enjoy it, so you know, it will be nothing really new to me, but yeah. So later you get the Clockwork Orange, so I'll see you guys later. Or otherwise tomorrow for Lake Placid, the final chapter.